Teyla Marchand and Brant Colvin walked into Linford's most prestigious restaurant dressed like royalty, poised, polished, and pretending. Behind their dazzling smiles and designer clothes was a carefully planned scam that had already left, a trail of unpaid bills and angry restaurant owners across the city. But what they didn't know was that their final performance was about to end in the most unexpected way. In the heart of downtown Linford, where high-rises gleam under city lights and the nightlife is as lavish as the wallets that fuel it, a mysterious couple began to make a name for themselves without saying a word. They were young, always impeccably dressed, and seemed to glide through the city's most exclusive restaurants as if they owned every room they entered. Their names were not well known to the public at first, but to chefs, waiters, and bartenders, Teyla Marchand and Brant Colvin were becoming infamous, albeit quietly. No one could quite place who they were or what they did for a living, but one thing was certain: they never paid for their meals. Teyla had an effortless charm, the kind that didn't ask for attention but received it anyway. Her smile was polished, her walk confident, and her taste in fashion far exceeded what most 20-somethings could afford. Brant, always a step behind her, looked like the silent type, calculating eyes, expensive watches, and shoes too clean for city streets. They arrived together, always right on time, always calm, and always hungry. They would request the best seat in the house, often without a reservation, and somehow they always got it. The couple ordered with flair: caviar starters, Wagyu mains, the sommelier's finest bottle of red. The staff would assume they were social media influencers, models, or rich kids living off trust funds. They tipped well, at least in the beginning. Teyla would ask about imported cheese pairings, and Brant would nod silently, pretending to ponder the wine list. They blended in so well that no one questioned their authenticity. But while everything appeared perfect on the surface, tiny inconsistencies began to surface. Their names never appeared in the reservation systems. The credit cards they claimed to have forgotten in the car were never retrieved. Plates were often left half-eaten, suggesting they never truly came for the food. At first, restaurant managers brushed it off as harmless. Maybe a couple had a fight and left. Maybe they were embarrassed about a declined card. But then it happened again. And again. 5 restaurants in 2 weeks. Different staff, different menus, same result. The couple vanished before the check arrived. Some employees suspected it was just bad luck. One waiter believed he must have missed them slipping out during a rush. Others joked about ghost diners, but the truth was far more deliberate. Teyla and Brant had turned skipping the bill into an art form. Their movements were fluid, premeditated, and synchronized. Teyla would always stand up to take a picture by the window, just as Brant would excuse himself to the restroom. Minutes later, they'd both be gone, their table left in immaculate disorder. Napkins folded, cutlery aligned, wine still. Swirling in the glass. The restaurant community, while competitive, occasionally shared notes on unusual customers. Within a month, whispers about a mysterious couple making rounds through Linford's upscale dining scene started growing louder. No one had a clear photo, no one had a real name, and no one had a clue where they came from or where they went after each elegant heist. The only consistency was the aftermath: confusion, embarrassment, and unpaid bills ranging from $300 to over $1,200. Ironically, the couple's fame grew on social media. Teyla's Instagram was filled with perfectly lit food photos, designer outfits, and tagged locations that didn't always match where she actually was. Brant had no public profile, but often appeared in her stories, always smiling, always raising a glass, always just out of focus. Their followers praised their style, unaware that each post was a breadcrumb in a much darker trail. Behind the likes and filters, though, a storm was quietly building. One restaurant had recently upgraded their security system due to unrelated thefts, and on one particular night, Teyla and Brant walked right into that restaurant, unaware that for the first time, their faces were being captured. Not in a selfie, but in high-definition surveillance footage. What had started as a clever game was about to unravel, and the city's most glamorous dine-and-dash duo were on the verge of exposure. Teyla Marchand and Brant Colvin were not ordinary scammers. What they did required precision, timing, and a shared understanding that went beyond casual crime. Their dining scam was not just a matter of skipping out on checks. It was a carefully orchestrated performance, perfected through repetition and boldness. Every move they made inside a restaurant was part of a larger routine, almost like a dance. While the outside world saw them as a glamorous couple living the high life, they were, in reality, operating a professional-level con. They began each evening by researching their target. Teyla was the one who handled most of the planning. She combed through restaurant websites, read reviews, watched tagged social media posts, and even checked staff rosters when possible. She knew when the restaurant would be at its busiest, which tables had the worst sightlines, and which exits weren't. Monitored. Brant's role was more tactical. He would visit the locations in advance, posing as a delivery guy or a customer using the restroom, just to check camera placements and backdoor accessibility. On the night of the con, they never drove their own car. Instead, they'd take ride shares, making sure there was no license plate or parking record to track. Teyla would always walk in first, sometimes in a wig, sometimes in oversized sunglasses. She was quick to smile at the hostess, compliment the lighting, or show surprise at how unbelievably beautiful the dining room looked. Brant would follow, usually quiet, sometimes pretending to be on a phone call, and always scanning the room with sharp, restless eyes. They never sat in the middle. They always asked for a booth, a window seat, or a private corner. Teyla would comment on the ambiance, take out her phone, and begin photographing everything: the menu, the table, setup, the wine bottle. She gave the illusion of being both wealthy and entitled, and it worked. Staff often went the extra mile to impress them, assuming they were influencers or critics. That kind of attention made it even easier for the couple to execute their scam. Everyone was too busy trying to please them to notice the subtle signs of their deceit. Once seated, they ordered big. Teyla would ask about rare ingredients or inquire about vegan tasting options just to appear knowledgeable. Brant would choose the most expensive cocktail or vintage wine, knowing they had no intention of paying for it. Every item they ordered served a purpose. It added to the illusion, inflated the bill, and distracted the staff. They rarely finished anything. A few bites here, a few sips there, just enough to make it look like they were savoring the experience. The escape always followed a script. Brant would excuse himself about halfway through the meal. He'd make his way to the restroom, but would instead quietly unlock a side exit. Sometimes he'd slip out immediately. Other times he'd return to the table briefly to avoid suspicion. Teyla, meanwhile, kept the staff engaged. She might ask to speak with the chef, request dessert recommendations, or feign interest in booking the venue for a private event. These distractions created just enough confusion. When it was time to go, they moved fast. Teyla would head toward the front, acting as if she was going outside for a phone call or to grab her wallet from the car. Brant would follow from another direction. In most cases, they were out of the building within 20 seconds of standing up. No arguments, no scenes, just a clean departure that looked so natural most staff didn't notice they were gone until minutes later. They also varied their methods just enough to avoid predictability. Sometimes they paid for small appetizers or a single cocktail to build trust before skipping the bill. Other times they left behind a fake name and number, promising to return with their forgotten card. They used different outfits, changed their accent slightly, and even created a fake story about being new in town. It was all part of maintaining the illusion. Their success fed their confidence. Each night they got away with it, they grew bolder. They started choosing even more high-profile locations, targeting restaurants known for celebrity guests or media attention. They thought they were invisible, that no one could outsmart them. But what they didn't realize was that their growing ambition was also leaving behind a pattern, one that was starting to catch the eye of someone who wasn't so easily fooled. Chef Morten Reeve had spent over 2 decades building his fine dining restaurant Salt and Fable into one of Linford's most respected culinary destinations. His reputation was built not only on the exquisite flavors of his seasonal menus, but on the integrity and discipline he demanded from every detail in his restaurant. He had seen all kinds of customers walk through his doors: celebrities, critics, tourists, and locals. But something about the couple who came in one rainy Thursday evening didn't sit right with him. They were charming, no doubt. The woman had a striking presence, carrying herself with the kind of grace that made people turn their heads. The man was more reserved, the quiet observer type, but clearly well-dressed and aware of his surroundings. They requested a window seat overlooking the city. She complimented the decor, asked about the handmade pasta, and requested a sommelier's recommendation for a wine pairing. Morten, watching from the kitchen pass, noted that they didn't touch half the food. The wine, a $320 bottle from his private cellar, was barely sipped. Yet the woman kept her phone out, photographing every plate as it arrived, angling the camera for the best lighting. At first, Morten assumed they were influencers. That wouldn't be new. Many came to his restaurant to show off for social media, tagging the location, uploading the food, and rarely mentioning the name of the chef who crafted it. But something about this pair felt rehearsed. Their chemistry was robotic. They never looked at each other for long. Their phones were constantly active. And the longer they sat there, the more obvious it became. They weren't there to enjoy a meal. They were performing. When Morten heard from the manager 20 minutes later that the couple had left suddenly, claiming they'd forgotten their wallet in the car and never returned, he felt the anger rise. But more than that, he felt insulted. They hadn't just stolen food, they had mocked the craft. He pulled the security footage immediately. The video showed exactly what he feared. The man had walked out through a service exit near the kitchen, a path few customers even noticed. The woman had casually picked up her purse, smiled at the hostess, and exited through the front door while chatting on her phone. No signs of panic. No hesitation. It was methodical. As Morten reviewed the footage frame by frame, something caught his eye. When the man leaned near the bar to glance toward the exit, his sleeve shifted slightly. Underneath was a faint tattoo, 3 vertical lines and a circle, small but unique. That detail stuck with Morten. He'd seen it before, not on a person, but in an article shared in a private online chefs group, a discussion about a dine and dash couple making rounds through Linford's best spots. That night, Morten went online and scrolled through the forum. He found the thread. Other chefs had described similar experiences. A fashionable couple, no reservation, big orders, and then suddenly gone before the check arrived. In one case, they ordered a private chef's tasting. In another, they claimed to be visiting food critics from New York. None had any proof, just blurry camera stills and vague descriptions. But it was enough to draw a connection. Morten uploaded his security footage to the thread and added his own account. Within 24 hours, 5 different restaurant owners responded, all claiming they recognized the couple. One even had a partial name. The woman had signed a check under the name Teyla Marcel, a variation that was likely fake. Realizing that this was more than a one-off incident, Morten contacted an old acquaintance, Lucan Dorr, a former detective turned private investigator. Lucan had a reputation for solving high-end fraud cases and had worked with hospitality businesses before. When Morten showed him the footage, Lucan was quiet at first. Then he zoomed in on the tattoo on the man's wrist and nodded. That was a signature he had seen once before, in a financial scam case 3 years ago that had gone cold. Lucan took the case. And in that moment, the couple who thought they had mastered the art of deception had unknowingly made their first major mistake. Someone had finally noticed the details they had worked so hard to hide. And unlike their usual victims, Chef Morten wasn't going to let this go. Lucan Dorr wasn't a man easily impressed. Years of chasing high-profile fraudsters had trained him to look past appearances and into the deeper patterns that most people missed. He knew that grifters, no matter how careful, always left something behind, a fingerprint of behavior, a habit too strong to suppress. And when he reviewed the footage from Salt and Fable, he saw more than just a skipped bill. He saw a signature operation, one that relied on consistency, confidence, and the illusion of wealth. The couple's timing, their exit strategy, the way they never touched certain parts of the meal, it all pointed to a rehearsed system. Lucan compared the footage from Morten's restaurant with other clips sent in by frustrated restaurant owners. The man, always in tailored clothing, adjusted his watch at the same moment before every departure. The woman, always with her phone out, followed the same pattern of photographing dishes in rapid succession, then carefully placing the phone face down. These small, repeated gestures were enough to build a behavioral profile. Using facial recognition software and some digital sleuthing, Lucan traced the woman's image across various social media accounts. One Instagram account stood out, a Thurbin menu filled with pictures of lavish meals, luxury interiors, and cityscapes. The profile owner claimed to be a culinary lifestyle blogger. Her name was listed as Teyla Monroe, but Lucan knew aliases were cheap. What was interesting, however, was her tagging habits. She would often tag locations, but rarely in real time. Most posts were delayed by days or weeks. It was a strategy, used to throw off anyone tracking her movements. Digging deeper, Lucan located metadata from one of the posts, an image of a dessert tray from a restaurant that had never even served it. The location was faked, but the original upload contained coordinates, and those coordinates pointed to a neighborhood just outside Linford. Using public records, Lucan cross-checked property rentals in that area and narrowed it down to a unit leased under a temporary corporate housing agreement. The leaseholder's name? Brant Colvin, remarkably close to the name Brant Colvin used on a suspicious guest form at another restaurant. Lucan went there personally. The building was secure but not impenetrable. He staked it out for 2 days. On the second day, he spotted them. The same couple. She wore a beige trench coat and oversized glasses. He carried a gym bag and held the door open with a practiced ease. Lucan didn't approach. He followed. They led him to another restaurant, a sleek rooftop bar downtown. This time, Lucan informed the staff ahead of time and worked with the manager to keep them under discreet surveillance. The couple followed their usual script, seated near the edge, ordering high-end cocktails, casually snapping pictures. As the check arrived, Brant excused himself. Teyla smiled, waved her hand, and slowly made her way toward the elevator. But this time, things didn't go as planned. As Brant attempted to slip out the back door, he found it locked. The staff had quietly secured all exits. Teyla, stepping into the elevator, was met by 2 plainclothes officers. Neither resisted, neither spoke. For the first time in months, they looked genuinely caught off guard. At the station, their real names came out: Teyla Marchand and Brant Colvin, both originally from small towns, both with sealed juvenile records, and both connected to minor fraud cases that had never gone to trial. But this time, the evidence was stacked too high. Surveillance from multiple locations, matched behaviors, social media inconsistencies, and the discovery of a burner phone filled with restaurant notes, maps, and escape routes. Lucan turned it all over to the district attorney's office. The case became a citywide media sensation. News headlines dubbed them the fine dining phantoms. While some internet users were oddly fascinated, even sympathetic, most of the public was outraged. Dozens of restaurants came forward with claims, The damage wasn't just financial, it was reputational. People had lost jobs over those unpaid bills. Trust had been broken. In the end, Teyla and Brant didn't just steal meals. They built a fantasy world on the backs of hard-working people, believing no one would notice. But someone did. And now, the fantasy was collapsing faster than they could run. Teyla Marchand and Brant Colvin sat quietly in separate holding cells, the high walls of their fantasy life now replaced with cold concrete and the low hum of security cameras. For months, they had believed they were untouchable, 2 steps ahead of suspicion, hiding behind charm and perfectly curated illusions. But now, stripped of their fashionable disguises and clever exits, they were just 2 con artists caught in the reality they never prepared for. The investigation widened quickly after their arrest. With the help of Lucan Dorr's detailed report and the evidence gathered from phones and surveillance, authorities discovered a trail that stretched far beyond Linford. The couple had been scamming restaurants across multiple cities. In each place, they used similar tactics: temporary rentals under fake names, burner phones, rideshare accounts tied to prepaid cards, and aliases carefully selected to match their false identities. They had dozens of victims: boutique cafes, family-run eateries, and high-end restaurants, all left with unpaid bills and unanswered questions. What made the scam so effective was how believable it looked. Teyla had carefully built her online presence to appear as a sophisticated food blogger. Her Instagram, now deactivated by authorities, had over 30,000 followers, most of whom never suspected a thing. She had even faked brand partnerships, adding logos to photos and tagging companies who had never heard of her. Brant's role was less public but just as essential. He handled logistics, mapped out exits, and ensured their getaways were smooth. He also monitored online chatter to make sure they stayed ahead of suspicion. But while they had perfected the art of escaping dinner bills, they had underestimated how closely the culinary world was connected. Chef Morten Reeve's decision to involve Lucan Dorr had sparked a ripple effect. Chefs, managers, and restaurant owners began sharing stories, photos, and receipts. A private group chat turned into a formal database of suspicious incidents, and soon, law enforcement had more than enough to build a solid case. In court, the atmosphere was tense. The prosecution presented a timeline that spanned 10 months and 14 restaurants, with damages totaling over $47,000. Witnesses testified about feeling humiliated, deceived, even betrayed. One owner broke down on the stand, explaining how losing thousands of dollars in one night forced him to let go of 2 longtime employees. Another described how the couple's fake review online nearly destroyed her restaurant's reputation. Teyla sat still through most of the proceedings, emotionless, occasionally turning to whisper to her lawyer. Brant looked more uncomfortable, as if the weight of reality was beginning to press down harder than expected. The defense argued that the crimes, while deceptive, were nonviolent and exaggerated by media attention. But the judge didn't agree. He spoke firmly about the intentional nature of their actions, the calculated planning, and the arrogance of repeating the crimes so many times. Both were sentenced to prison. Teyla received 2.5 years, Brant 3, with restitution. Orders demanding they repay the affected businesses upon release. Their carefully crafted lives had unraveled, not in a dramatic chase or a moment of betrayal, but through the quiet persistence of those they underestimated. The restaurants they scammed had no weapons, no teams of investigators, just watchful eyes, strong memories, and eventually, one determined chef who refused to let it go. The story of Teyla and Brant faded from headlines within weeks, replaced by newer scandals and louder stories. But among the city's restaurant community, their tale remained a cautionary legend. Chefs began installing better surveillance, coordinating alerts, and warning each other of unusual behavior. One small-time cafe owner even started a podcast, sharing stories of scams and theft in the service industry, and Lucan Dorr, never one for fame, quietly returned to his work, satisfied that justice had been done. He had no doubt others like Teyla and Brant would come along. Different faces, new tricks. But he also knew that in a city where reputation mattered, those who tried to steal the spotlight would eventually get burned. In the world of fine dining, every performance has an end. And for the so-called fine dining phantoms, the final bill had finally arrived.